And welcome back to the conversation, aka the Sam and Drizzy Show, and the Nate and Drizzy Show. Fuck, I'm already screwing this up. You guys gotta love it. You know who they are. They're actually some of the most favorite people now on the YouTube side of this channel in regards to the active viewership. So, first and foremost, he is an immigration lawyer out of Omaha, Nebraska, kicking ass and taking names. You know him. He is a fellow nerd. His name's Nate Dallin. And he does a lot of good stuff. We love him over there, and he's sporting that Star Wars apparel over there, showing his nerdiness. Thank you for the credentials. We always appreciate that. Next, he is he's a political operative for the Democratic Party of the United States, kicking ass, doing the real touching grass that so many here only wish they could do. Please give it up for Sam Drizzy. How y'all doing? So it's been a while since we've been able to kind of get together because of one reason or another. But there's a lot of things going on, and we're kind of just turning this into like the weekly / bi-weekly intellectual show. We were trying to do that for Mask Off Saturdays, but I can't get Fatherhood Nate to commit to anything outside of Thursday. I mean, it must be rough with boys. I tell you what.
No, it's not. I wish it were just my family. Part of it is the border situation has generated an incredible backlog at work. So that's really what's probably driven a lot of this as of late. My tardiness and my missing of things.
So what you're saying to me is that you are a true American working late and putting in extra hours.
Yeah. Big facts.
All right, fair enough. So, we had a few things that were in the docket list for things that we would want to talk about. I remember marriages were one. We were going to talk about the decline of families. We talked about kids and demography. There's a few other things that were even in the list there. I still need to get Nate and Soyaddle together to do nuclear, even though we beat the living hell out of nuclear on this channel. But what were you guys feeling today?
Well, if Nate is ready to do...
I'm not. Whatever you just said. Nate's ready for nothing. I came unprepared. I just came here with my brain and my eyes and my thoughts. That's all I came with.
We'll do it a different time then. We had a request apparently from the viewers.
I know.
And a deep dive on family formation.
100%. And I had even given some Twitter fodder that came up about... male, like 20 and 30-year-old males who have not had any sexual interactions with another human being, and how that's on the rise, and just a bunch of stuff. And it's very interesting.
Uptick. I mean, that's an exponential curve.
Yeah, no, it is.
You can't refer to this without making it visible to the viewers, though.
Yeah, I don't know, Ty. How do I get smart? And I guess I could try to share. Hold on, I bet I could get smart and make this happen. Also, I have yeah. Here we go. Let's see if I can. Here we go. All right, give me a second here, fellers.
Uh-oh.
And then I'll show you. This is
a post about male youth virginity, right?
That's exactly what it is.
So it's the incel vote.
Oh my god. Is this gonna be Is this gonna be a memes episode? Is that where we're going?
No, I've got some stuff I want to discuss a little later after we get done with this.
Oh shoot! Sure. I had it up and then it disappeared. Well, why did that happen? Here, hold on. I'm just not. Okay, there we go. Check it out. Bitcoin was invented in 2009. Probably a coincidence. Young male virginity on the rise. And yeah, that's the Bitcoin value map used to look like that, but no mas.
I feel like a lot of people out there, even if they could get laid, they'd be like, "No, I'm saving it."
Honestly,
I'm hodling more than one thing here.
Honestly, I think what trends more with this personally is the number of World of Warcraft expansions. I think that is actually our safe bet here.
Didn't Carl make that joke?
I think he did.
He did. He also was a dev on World of Warcraft. Do you know that?
Yes.
What? Really?
Yes. Carl does
Makes
all
sense.
the things.
Makes sense. Well, that's interesting. All right, so what's on your mind, Sam?
Well, let's close this out. Did you have any comment on this or any thoughts? Any serious thoughts?
One of the many disturbing trends in our nation.
I love how before that steep rise, it was just like going up and down in a jagged. It's like This year, it was up. That year, it was down. What was happening in those years where it went down, I wonder?
The super good question.
Yeah.
It's called Wet Week. Everyone fucks at the same time, okay?
Is that how that works?
Yeah, have you guys never went off to college? Like when like first week of college, everybody fucks. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, well, I went to Brigham Young University. That was not my experience during my first week. That is not how that worked at all. So no, the answer to your question is no, Tiberius. I've somehow made it through 7 years of university level education and never had I'm sorry, what did you call it? Wet week?
Yeah.
Lovely. No, I've not had the privilege to participate in such an event.
Okay, let's swiftly move past this before.
Yeah. Well, no, yeah, it's relevant. It's relevant for a lot of reasons, but it touches on this family formation stuff. Yes. It touches on demographics. It touches on depression and like all sorts of other things, and it's relevant. But
the stuff I want to talk about is a link between geopolitics and the financial system. So I feel like it's right up the alley of this group.
I'm ready for this. This will be good.
So I want to talk about a dynamic that I noticed at play in multiple arenas. In one arena...
If you bring up the Bank of Japan, I'm going to kiss you. Okay, keep going, though.
I hadn't thought of it, but, it totally plays in. All right, so...
Play to the crowd, goddammit. Let's go.
So I want to talk about the nature of institutions and how they work. So particularly how U.S. institutions could seem to be growing in strength even as they are failing. So, and this can work on multiple levels with lots of different institutions, right? So in this case, I wanted to talk most about, there's lots of places we could go with this, right? But I want to talk most about the world financial order underpinned by the U.S. dollar and the U.S.'s status as global hegemon with its military, right? And we can examine this at the level of the financial economy, domestically and internationally, and also at the level of the foreign policy and geopolitical leadership. And I think that the dynamics are linked, obviously, and they're flip sides of the same thing. So that has a lot of implications as well. But here are the key notes, and you can tell me whether you agree or disagree. The U.S. dollar is super powerful. But, like all powerful institutions, the power is in jawboning. For example, it's more powerful as a threat of its use than the use of it itself. And the more you actually use it, the more its power degrades. So do you see that dynamic at play here, or do you see that dynamic in institutions at all? Do you have any observations? I have some examples if you...
Yeah, go ahead, Ty.
I would have said that 100% agreed with this until the 24th of February. And then that kind of went the other way, where, unironically, a lot of people have gone with the dollar runs the show, and if it does, or if it is used correctly, it can really punch some people in the fucking teeth without, without actually having to do that. And so... I'll put it this way. We were seeing a lot of countries try to walk away because either they were rivals to the Americans, such as the Russians or the Chinese. We also had our allies kind of trying to go their own way with the euro and whatnot, where they're like, well, screw the dollar because, that doesn't really allow us to meet our ends. But then all of a sudden they're like, oh, wait, you can literally shut down entire economies if we're all playing by the same rulebook? Okay, if we're an American ally, we get defense, we get economic security, or at least economic coherentness. Basically the bottom doesn't fall out on us, but we have to deal with the Americans and their snazzy politics. Where do we sign? Unironically, that kind of seems to be the conversation in geopolitics right now. Is that you know what? America can be boss daddy unless they do something incredibly horrible. And right now, they're really on everybody's good list.
This gets at the, it can seem like they're growing in strength even as they're failing. and I'm not saying that I think that they actually, it's not seeming, it actually is getting stronger and also failing at the same time, in my mind.
Failing. What are your measures of success and failure?
My measure is in the power of its use. So I'm saying
As
that
measured by what?
Its ability to coerce cooperation.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that might be true then. I'd agree with it by that, because I mean, what I would not agree with is this idea of like, the global currency, it's fiat. Eventually, it goes to zero. Like that. I mean, that's insanely stupid. I disagree with that nonsense.
Yeah, I mean,
But if your measure is, so if it's not price relative to commodities, or if it's not price relative to other goods, but instead you're looking at it as mostly a geopolitical tool, yes, it will be so successful that eventually it will stop being successful. I think that's probably right.
right. That the the U.S. really opened a can of whoop ass over the last couple months. But they never went this far before because they never had to, right? And I think that similarly, a lot of other U.S. institutions have been doing the same thing. And it's not that it's not that the power of the measure that you've decided to take with it setting a new precedent diminishes. It's that people necessarily, if they want to keep on living, have to find a workaround if you're going to start using it that way. So the threat of it can coerce. Can keep people in line for a lot longer, for many, many more decades than the actual use of it. Because once you start playing the card, people have to find a way to deal with the cards. So
except I mean, I agree with that in the aggregate, but it assumes that there's like a workaround. I don't know what the workaround is. I mean,
the workaround is poverty.
Well,
the workaround is poverty.
Oh my God.
And being able to handle poverty.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So as long as I'm going to impoverish and starve my populace just to avoid this institution that is the dollar, then yeah, you're right. That's fine.
Yeah,
totally fine.
But poverty's not forever. So this is not. I'm not talking about this on a scale of years. I'm talking about it on a scale of decades, right? That like the more that the U.S. leans into its role, the more that it pushes countries away, and to find some other workaround. And this is not just this is just one example, right? So here's another group of examples that I have to sort of show that this is not just limited, because it's hard to talk about an abstract without many more examples, right? So nuclear weapons, right? Like right now, everybody's scared of nuclear weapons because it's only been used twice. Right? But if people started using nuclear weapons willy-nilly, the world would be a lot worse place, and yet it would become normal enough that people would just have to they'd be like living in bunkers, and it'd be like that would be the world, and life would go on. Life would go on
bunker people. Well, life would go on. Asterisk for a slim life, right? Like for the human race, life would go on.
Right.
The 7 billion dead would like to email it in and say life did actually not go on for us.
That's an extreme example, but you understand how it applies here, right?
Yeah.
Federal Reserve interest rate moves. Yet another situation like that, right? Like they have to follow the bond market. They're not leading anything. They're like they act like they're in charge because the move itself is such a howitzer that they would rather not do it at all. They would rather just stay out of the way, right? Because the more that they do it, the more heavy-handed it gets, and the less that the bond market, the participants in the bond market other than them, respect it. Legislative vetoes, yet another situation, right? Like the more successful presidents out there, you don't see them vetoing a lot of legislation because the threat of a veto is more powerful than once you start vetoing things a lot, people start looking for, okay, well, how can we get to the number of votes that'll
override the veto?
Override the veto, instead of working with you to negotiate over something that's going to be acceptable to all parties. And linked to that, Senate filibusters, right? Like The
Yeah, what's
filibuster.
this, Sam? Is there like a good term that captures all these
I
ideas?
don't know. I haven't come across one.
Yeah, me
I feel
neither.
like
And
there should be.
it calls to mind.
Diminishing returns on use. I mean,
Yeah, I learned this concept, and I didn't have a term for it either when I was in law school. But not from my law professors. I was hanging out with a buddy of mine named Damian Jackson. He grew up in D.C. in the '80s during the crack epidemic, and he said, "Nate, if you pull out your gun, you're shooting, right? Like if you pull out a gun and you point it at someone, you're pulling the trigger." He's like, I can't. This is the only thing I'm ever going to teach you, Nate. He's like, but you need to understand this. If you pull the gun, you must pull the trigger. But to Sam's point, as soon as you pull the trigger, that bullet has left. Right? That is no longer. It's like you can show the weapon, but as soon as it is unholstered, that baby's got to go, or else you're going to lose all the credibility. Right? The situation will have escalated. You will have not actually pulled the trigger, and so now it becomes totally useless. But at the same time, as soon as the ball leaves the barrel, the consequences, right? So, like, its best utility is as a deterrent. The second that it stops being a deterrent is either because no one believes you're actually going to pull the trigger, or
bingo.
you have pulled the trigger, and now there's a new world that you
And they have
just
to deal with the
created.
consequences. You have to deal with the
You have to deal with the consequences. Yeah, that's right. So anyway,
Right.
DC crack epidemic is teaching us things today, gentlemen.
Yeah.
But that's exactly the problem. If you pull out the
Crack's
gun,
teacher.
yeah, you've got to pull the trigger. And once you pull the trigger, the world will never be the same ever.
Right, and Senate filibusters are very much like this, right? Like when the Senate was designed by the framers, they designed it so that everything would be done by unanimous consent. Unanimous. You couldn't even consider legislation. You couldn't bring a bill to a vote without every U.S. senator being like, "All right." Can you imagine? And little by little, they've had to come up with rules,
Workarounds.
to like limit debate, so that you can actually get the votes on things. But now it's just assumed that filibusters are going to happen on every piece of legislation. So the power, it's not that it's any less powerful, right? Like you still have to get to 60 votes. But it just means that no one's impressed with it anymore. It's like,
Right.
great, well, now another filibuster. How do we deal with this, right? Presidential impeachments, right? We're on the road to this right now, where in just 40 years ago, the threat of impeachment was enough to compel a very savvy politician to impeach himself. Yeah. And just because the disgrace of being impeached would have been enough to scare him off the stage.
Now,
and now
it's
we're at
a
the
badge
point.
of honor. Yeah, have you really represented your base if you haven't been impeached?
right. And if you, I mean, I think that most presidents would relish a Senate trial at this point. I think if they impeach Biden after winning Congress, he is going to get feisty, and he's going to end up getting strong. And even if they end up removing him from office, he will end up going down a martyr because at this point the institution
It might be the only thing that saves his legacy at this point.
Well, that and handling this crisis with Russia so well. I mean, he's killing it.
Well, agreed, but he's going to get no credit. I mean, no one cares.
I know, that's funny. Let me just continue through the rest of this list so I can get it out, but then I want to...
Yeah, go ahead.
Debt defaults, like if your country just defaults over and over and over and over and over again, like, it's not like anyone's going to trust you anyway, but like it just diminishes its power, right? Like, or if you declare bankruptcy over and over. Labor strikes, right? Like the threat of strike is more powerful than the strike itself. And I would say also civil lawsuits, right? Like lots of disreputable businessmen, but Trump is a really good example of this. Like no one wanted to do business with him, but the reason why he ran for president is because he couldn't make any deals anymore, because no one wanted to make a deal with him anymore because he was so litigious that you just like guaranteed that if you did a deal with Trump, by the end of it you'd be in court with him. Like, do you really want that? No. But
Oh crap!
Yeah, is that me? Did I freeze?
No, he did.
Sam, we miss you.
True. Why do you do this? Oh, he's loading back in. Hello?
Maybe. Are there tornadoes in D.C. that we don't know about? I mean, somewhere on the East Coast that we don't know about? Undisclosed bunker at some unknown location, something.
Yeah.
Oh, he gone.
Son of a gun. Well, that's depressing. What the hell?
Where did DXY end today? Here, hold on a sec. Since we're talking about the dollar, we might as well start pulling some data. Check it out. 103.5. That's pretty legit.
Fucking nerd.
Dude, this is my favorite graph every day. Check this baby out.
You do post it up quite a lot.
All the time. This is one of my key indicators. Look at that. Look at that beauty. So for all those who care to look over on the screen, this is the U.S. dollar currency index. So back in 1973, the 6 largest trading partners with the United States, their currencies were all they created a baseline where the U.S. dollar was indexed against 6 currencies. Actually, it might have been 7 back then, but then the euro collapsed some of them together. And they said at 100, so when the index is at 100, that is where the dollar traded relative to its largest trading partners in 1973. So you can see here, this is the dollar strength relative to a bunch of our largest trading partners minus China. China does not make the list because they weren't on the list in 1973. And you can see how well it's done or not done, and that's the last 5 years. And Ty, you will notice we are at a 5-year high, and the dollar right now is worth more on the international market with our largest trading partners today than it was in 1973.
Right.
Part of that's because the Japanese yen has been nosediving so hard, and the yen is one of the included currencies. But the euro's not doing well, the Aussie dollar's not doing well. Canadian dollar's doing okay. The rest of them are just garbage.
The Canadian dollar and the pound are the only things that are like doing okay, right?
Outside of the dollar, yeah, and of course the Canadian one makes more sense because they're such a commodity-based economy. Yeah, so like they're overall. Oh, Sam's trying to tell us something, but yeah, okay, good, yeah. But the Canadians have they're so well connected to oil as oil prices go up and down and all over the place. Their currency kind of goes with it, so it makes sense in a world of stronger oil numbers this happens. But I just thought I'd float this out to everybody that the US dollar is at a 5-year high inside the international market, and it's marching. The all-time high was in the mid-80s right after Volcker started raising rates. So this shouldn't surprise people, right? The last time that the Fed decided to start raising rates faster than the rest of the world, the US dollar spiked to its all-time high relative to the world at 120 on this index. And right now we're at 103. And it's just marching. I mean, take a look at that baby. Since May of last year to now, I mean, that thing looks like the Bitcoin chart, right? I mean, that thing is steep. And so this is continuing to march on. And the more the Fed continues to do what it's doing and is hawkish, then it's going to continue to march on in this manner and wreck a bunch of stuff. And that's just the economics. That's just the supply and demand of dollars. That has little to do with the geopolitics, which is what Sam is more interested in, which is when the U.S. dollar is in this position, which it is right now, we have a jackhammer that we could go deploy against our enemies if we so desire, and that's a little bit what we did against the Russians. So I find all that to be very interesting.
And this is where I want to go into this, right? So everyone expects the Federal Reserve to tighten in order to crush inflation, and everyone thinks that the Federal Reserve is the big mover that's leading the market around by its nose, right? But
it's not.
It's not, right? To me, I watch a lot of these crazy libertarians talking.
Cringe.
The ones who say that all the fiat currencies go to zero, right? So like, even those people, like the people who hate the Federal Reserve, it seems like they're the ones who think that it's the most powerful. They think it's so powerful that it can keep exerting policy with impunity, without any kind of revolt. And they seem to have the most faith out of anyone that capitalism is going to lose to the globalist conspiracy led by the Federal Reserve, right? They're like,
I thought that was super capitalism. What are you talking about?
Well, but they think that it's communism. No. Up is down, right? but they think that it's going to work. Like, they're simultaneously saying that this is evil and that it's going to work. But the reason why they say it's evil is because it goes against human nature somehow. So if it goes against human nature, then how would it work? Like, anyway, sorry. What I'm saying is that I think that
these people are
the
psycho.
Federal Reserve those people are wrong in that the Federal Reserve actually isn't in control. It just appears that it is. And it's following the bond market. So over the last few months, the Federal Reserve has been making noises about tightening, but this is only the second time they've tightened, and the first time they've tightened above 0.25% in a single session. But it's been going up, Nate, as you pointed out. It's been going up for months and months and months, and it's because bond vigilantes, who are bond market investors who protest against monetary and fiscal policies considered inflationary by selling bonds. They're the ones who've driven the rates up to 2.5%. And that's...
Well, I'm sorry, you think that bond vigilantes are the main driver of this?
Yes.
Are these bond vigilantes called the Bank of Japan?
That could be part of it, right? But it could
because I think that the central banks are doing this on purpose. And so, as long as you put the central banks inside the bond vigilante category, then yes. I would agree.
I would say that countries that want to devalue against the U.S. dollar and are unhappy that the U.S. is trying to loosen its own monetary policy, and relative to them,
right,
are within that same category of people.
This is why. So if you see the Bank of Japan as a hedge fund instead of as a nation, and that hedge fund is more or less shorting the crap out of the U.S. dollar in the hopes that it will drive the price up like crazy, I would totally agree. And that's why I've got a couple of guys who are expats. They live abroad, and they like to talk about stuff. And one guy on Twitter has found the Bank of Japan determines if there is a bond move in the entire American system right now. And he does. He just pulls up the charts of when Japan picks up when they dump US dollars or US bonds and when they soak US bonds up. And that is the largest indicator of what's going to happen to the bond market. And the Japanese need inflation. They've been begging for inflation for decades. They're finally getting it because they're literally soaking it up from the United States. The U.S. is like, hey, we're going to quantitative tighten, meaning we're going to stop purchasing bonds on the secondary market as part of a swap with banks, and we're going to raise the overnight window rate, right? Those are the two tools that they have. Plus, they give a bunch of rhetoric saying that we think the economy, blah, blah, blah. They've deployed all of their tools to try to stop inflation. And so the Japanese said, oh, good. As you're trying to stop inflation, we're going to try to drum up as much as inflation as is humanly possible. And so if you want to call them a bond vigilante, then I'm all in, because as a sovereign entity, they have become bond vigilantes to the max. And they love seeing the dollar go up because now they have a chance of trying to recover some of their manufacturing base and being able to get an edge in international trade. That's 100% what they're trying to do right now. I don't know how long that'll work, but it seems painful. Like, if I was a Japanese citizen, I'd be like, what the freak? This is very strange. Like, why are we devaluing our own currency? Their currency's down 16% relative to the world since January, right? Like, our inflation, like, oh, we're like bemoaning. Oh, we're at like 7% inflation. The Japanese doubled that in 3.5 months.
I wonder if they're doing that on purpose, though, man. Because I've heard a different reading of this. I've heard that the Japanese, were trying to do it without getting inflation, and that they have been able to do so. Basically, they want to be a manufacturing center again, yes. Right?
Yes.
But the problem that they have is that it's not the cost of the manufactured goods that's going up with inflation. It's the cost of the base inputs.
No. That's right. Okay, so to your point, then, if we went and looked, and we'd have to do research on this, but I think if we went and looked at the Japanese economy, their core CPI versus their general CPI for their own goods at home and what those cost, my guess is that they don't have a 16% inflation rate. Right, I bet that it mirrors more or less ours, because what's really driving those numbers is a supply and demand problem.
Right.
I'm talking about their ability to do international trade. So what they're doing is if there's anything imported, anything that any base commodity that you're talking about that has to be purchased outside of the great nation of Japan, which by the way is a lot of things.
Lots.
That's a lot of things for them. All those things will get more expensive. So all the inputs will go up, right? And if they have to use yen on the international market, that's a problem. Unless, of course, they're soaking up U.S. treasuries and they're just using those to flip to banks to create U.S. dollars out of thin air so that they can purchase using our dollars inside the commodity market, which would be smart, and I'm sure that's what they're doing. Then yeah, all they're doing is they're just driving down their relative cost for manufacturing or value added relative to everybody else to try to go gobble up market share, and no one's going to stop them. The U.S. is like, well, we can't do anything about this right now.
Well, putting aside Japan specifically, and I understand
they're an outlier. I admit they're an outlier.
Well, but you're saying that they're a major factor that's moving the market right now, and I suppose that we would be remiss without bringing up the British pound in this discussion too, since today of all days they had a major issue. But I want to make a prediction real quick here. So,
here we go.
Yeah.
Hot take.
And to be clear, I could be very wrong, but I think that because all of this stuff, all the tightening in the bond market happened before the Federal Reserve actually made a move.
Correct.
Because they don't want to degrade the power of their own institutional tool, which is raising and lowering rates, right? The Fed is going to have to abandon its rate hiking plan in order to keep up the appearance that it's still in control. Because that is what they want most of all. The appearance of control is the most important thing. It's the thing that, like you said, once you pull the gun, you have to fire it.
Yeah.
Because if you waver,
you will be shot.
The appearance of control is shattered, and
That's
they can't afford it. That when everyone talks about a soft landing that the Fed is looking for, and the soft landing is just maintenance of trust in the Fed that they're in control.
And not a depression.
What they want, they would be willing to tolerate any level of inflation or any level of deflation, including negative rates, the opposite. Any level of inflation, any level of deflation, negative rates, right? Yeah, including negative rates, as long as it appears like they did it on purpose.
Okay. So let me rephrase this, Sam, and let's see if we're still talking about the same thing. So I see the Fed as having 4 tools and 2 mandates. Okay, so they have 4 tools and 2 mandates.
Yeah.
The 2 mandates, we'll start there, are 1, price stability, that's control inflation, right? But that's what this price stability mandate is.
Right, 2% target.
Right, and so they recently raised it to a 2% target off of 1.5. And then the second is full employment, which they have no control over. I don't know what genius gave them that mandate, but whatever.
Political folks, the elected officials did, of course. And then they're trying to add more with environmental goals and stuff. Anyway, I
want to blame Newt Gingrich for this. I have no idea if that's his fault or not, but
probably.
I just hate him so much. I just want to
blame the entire boomer generation. I mean, it's always them. So
yeah, and I think was it in the 80s or the 90s? I think it was in the 90s. Anyway, it doesn't matter. That's a stupid historical question. But those are their 2 mandates: is price stability, okay, and full employment. Those are their 2 official mandates.
There's 4 tools.
Yeah, 3rd mandate probably is. They just don't talk about it, and that is credit market stability.
Right.
Which is slightly different, but of course it's so connected to the other 2 that through osmosis it appears, right? Somewhere in there's this idea. So if the credit market started to freeze, but there wasn't any inflation and there wasn't an employment problem, the Fed would react like the world is on fire, and for good reason, because both of their mandates will fail if that one fails. So that'd be the 3rd one. Now there's 4 tools that they have. Tool number 1 is regulation. They are still the main regulator of the banking system. And so through that, they can try to, for instance, they can drop the reserve rate to 0 with the banks, which they did on March 26, 2020. They have not raised that since. But they've got some regulatory stuff over the banks to try to influence them to release more credit into the system. So that's one tool. They don't use that one very often because the rules are more or less set. and there isn't a lot of movement on those, but theoretically they could. That's how, by the way, that's how Hank Paulson forced Wells Fargo and a few of the other banks to take money from TARP, is because he more or less had Ben Bernanke threaten them and say, if you don't do this, we'll pull your banking license. Pretty big problem, right? So in a crisis, them being a regulator really matters a whole bunch. Two is the overnight window. So this allows for banks to go at a low rate to use the overnight window to borrow money so they can balance their books. From the overnight window has also flowed the repo and reverse repo windows, which are sort of underneath that same authority. This has to do with if I have extra collateral or extra money, I can go park it at the Fed and still make money off of it. So that's the second tool. So again, first tool is regulation. Second tool is the overnight rate window with the repo windows. Third then would be and that's the overnight window is where the rates matter. So they set how much they will charge you for the privilege of borrowing money for them overnight. Okay, so that's where the rates come from. The third one is the balance sheet. So they can purchase stuff and put it onto their balance sheet from certain entities. And so they can suck things out from the economy and put it on their balance sheet. And then they can... Treasuries, right? Right, so that's quantitative easing. At least that's what we've called it recently. But it's just really balance sheet expansion. But true quantitative tightening is when they actually shrink the balance sheet, which has happened so few times in history, it's hard to know what exactly that looks like. But they try to take things off of their balance sheets and put it back into the marketplace. And then the fourth one is job owning. And this is what Sam said. It's probably actually their most important one, is that they have to they try to create confidence through job owning. Sometimes this is called in the academic literature forward guidance, right? Forward guidance. So they intentionally say stuff to try to guide the market, and they create it's the Wizard of Oz, right? Like almost exactly. Like, don't look at the man behind the curtain. I'm really this big green head over here or whatever. Or is that Zordon from Power Rangers? Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's like the same idea. It's like the same idea. But anyway, that's the one that Sam has been focusing on right now. I don't want to undercut their two other tools, right? The repo windows and the overnight rate window, and then the balance sheet. They matter. They matter a lot. And actually, with those two tools, they could ruin the economy. Like if they wanted to, they don't control the future and growth. But man, if they wanted to, they could just run the whole ship off the rails.
Or they could just create so much lending that if they wanted to take interest rates to -5% and start making it so that banks are like, here, take this loan, take $1 million, take it, right? They could do that.
And that's fair. And I should say too, one other thing that they've done, and it's super dubious if they have the legal authority to do it, are called these currency swaps. So if they really needed to, they can actually lend an unlimited number of US dollars. This is the closest thing they can do. The what?
Directly to other central banks, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's right. But it's a swap lines. Yeah, they're called swap lines. And so what the Federal Reserve can do is they can send US dollars over to the Bank of Japan, and the Bank of Japan has to send back yen at a certain rate. They can just set it. It's not set by the market. It's set by the banks themselves. So you do a swap, right? So technically, we start holding onto currency. For every dollar that got sent over, a certain number of yen came back, and they use that a lot. Allies, right? What's that?
They only do that with close allies, though, right?
Yeah, it's a short list. China and Russia are not on the list.
Right.
Okay. But of course, not surprisingly, the countries that have ended up using those swap lines the most, their banks will then go get US dollars from their central bank, and then they can go do business with everybody who's on the naughty list, including China and Russia. So China and Russia have been able to benefit from this. There's a really funny exchange between Ben Bernanke and a member of the House Finance Committee, I think in 2010. They were doing the wind down on all the different stuff, and it's a Democrat, and he goes, where do you have the authority to cut a $90 billion check to Japan? And Bernanke glows like, let me ask legal counsel. It's in there. It's in there someplace. And people were like, what? This is crazy. And the Fed really likes these because they can actually print money that way. They just can't do it inside the territory of the United States, right? The Fed cannot print money inside the territory of the U.S., but it can do it abroad. And so they love this. They love doing this, but they have to get collateral back, and that collateral always comes in the form of currencies. But anyway, that's a little bit of just techno babbling. But to Sam's point, the Fed relies mostly on its tool to forward guidance and jawboning to try to steer the overall economy because they're just limited. I think the one thing that they could do, if we ever really got hyperinflation, they could just crash the economy into a deflationary hell if they really needed to. They've never done that since the Fed's been around. Most of the time, they're trying to find ways to create inflation, but that's not really in their toolkit. Like, intentionally creating inflation is very difficult for the Fed to do.
Right. It's not in their mandate. I mean, the Fed was created during a time when inflation was running so rampant they needed a way to slow it down.
That's exactly right. And so all of its tools, all of its actual tools besides the jawboning, all of its actual physical tools are all designed to bring inflation down.
Yes.
And I think that's important to understand because people think that the Fed can create inflation willy-nilly, and it's just not true. It's just not. I mean, Congress did a really good job at making sure that couldn't happen. So,
Right. And look, so I think my main point here is that the appearance of being in control is paramount. And that applies to the U.S. military, the presidency, the Congress, like we just had it where there was a leak at the Supreme Court, right? Like now the Supreme Court has to act like they're going to investigate who that was because their integrity is at stake. The Fed, all of these people, they need to appear to be in control, even though in reality nobody's in control, and it doesn't matter who's in office either. If like Trump can, rage all he wants, he's not in control either. Nobody's in control. No one's ever in control of anything, and the best way to handle it is to just get comfortable with the idea that everything is chaos, nobody's in control. But the average person can't handle that, which is why we have government. They want to feel like someone's in control. So the case that I'm trying to make here with all of this is that the reason why we're seeing all this macho strength from the U.S. government right now is because we're firing bullets out of our gun right now that were without precedent, that we've never done before. And they're like big bullets, right? But the world will adjust to that too. And the more of these things that we pull out of our toolkit and the more powers we invent to add on to those, the more our power gets degraded. The power of our institutions gets degraded, right? Not the power that underlies the United States, which is
there's got to be a term for this.
It's just degrading institutions. Power of institutions.
I mean, it almost sounds like diminishing returns, but it's not because it's not steady. No, okay. So just to underline Sam's point, the more you have to use the tools that were given to the Fed, the more there's something wrong, right? And so the more they act, that means the bigger the problem is.
That's right. And you can't. It's not like they can't ever go back to a world where they didn't use that power.
Right.
They're not actually fixing anything. Nothing gets fixed. Everything just continues to spiral until there's a reset of some type that involves the destruction of institutions. And so I'm not saying that the U.S. is going to collapse into a third world backwater or even have any major problems. I'm saying that our status as global hegemon, unquestioned, where everyone is a part of our system and no one has an alternative system, that is going to come to an end. And the trick for the U.S. politicians right now, and we've talked about this a lot, so you'll remember how I always say this, but the point of the U.S. government is not to do stuff, but to make people feel good about stuff. It's the public interface model, right? So the trick for U.S. politicians in the future will be to fool American voters into thinking this was done on purpose and actually benefits us, when in reality, it's unquestionable that losing some measure of control over the world system is a diminishing of our power. It is. It's a retrenchment. And so I am, right now, I'm actually making the case that, and Ty, you're going to like this, that the right-wing populist coalition was made for this purpose, to keep our national pride from collapsing as our position of global prestige slips away. The real story, though, is that there's no way the U.S. could ever have maintained its position as sole hegemon atop a world hierarchy that includes everyone. collapse of the current paradigm is inevitable and unavoidable. And the truth is that its loss is a loss to the United States in terms of our wealth, prosperity, influence, and ability to exert leverage to win good deals for the United States on the international stage. And we're yet to see how this all happens, or whether it'll happen within our lifetimes. This could be, it could either happen within the decade, or we could find some solution to this now that pushes it off to our grandkids. But the days of the United States, I think if China gives in and comes back to the U.S. side and says, "Bye-bye, Russia, you're the scapegoat for now," that is going to do a lot to repair the U.S.'s image. But I think you could make the case, and I think a lot of people that we all listen to and respect their opinions, who are experts in this, would say that China will probably end up choosing poverty on purpose. And a couple generations, even a century of poverty, and to reset things for China paves the, then they've hit rock bottom, and there's nowhere to go but up. So they could have 3 government regimes change over the course of a century, and still end up in 500 years being the biggest, the wealthiest country in the world as the U.S. Loses its.
It could do what it's always done, which is just be plain. Like there's nowhere to go except horizontal. Like that's.
China has been the most powerful country in the world multiple times. So
yes, the problem is usually if you actually do this in the grand calculus, China has been powerful, and actually India falls in this too. They've been the most powerful country or areas on the planet out of scale, not out of
innovation
because
they innovated a fair bit, but I mean it's just a per capita issue. Their peoples have always been impoverished.
There's a few true golden ages for China. India really doesn't get them very much, like maybe the Gupta Empire. But like India's really good at like being forever poor. Like poverty is in their blood, unironically. China, on the other hand, China, on the other hand, has had some golden ages. Early mid-level of the Ming, as an example. Like you've got paper, you've got basically the invention of gunpowder, and a few of these other things that really makes China really look like they're on the up and up. And there's the conversation that China actually got here in the 1450s under the Ming, before they had Ming implosion.
Right. Yes.
And was it Ming who they think that the emperor controlled 1/3 of all of Earth's GDP? So that'd be the equivalent of a person controlling $30 trillion right now.
Yeah.
Right? Like
that's crazy. Well, they had the whole bureaucracy underneath. Anyway, just to finish my point, and I don't mean to belabor this, but it's okay. All this is okay, but it's going to be a political trick to trick everybody into feeling proud about how this turns out for us. Because
I agree with that.
It's not. I agree with a lot of the strategists that we paid attention to. Zion being the number one guy that I think we all listen to on this stuff. I agree that the U.S. is going to fall least compared to a lot of other nations, especially in this period. But we're all going down a little bit here, and the U.S. is going to lose prestige for sure, and that's okay. We outside of the political circus, which is going to be run by people who are good at populism, and where we're talking about truth, the truth of the situation. It's okay to be a little bit humble and not have your pride stake so much on feeling like you're in control of everything, and just live your life and be with your family, and that's the most important thing.
Fucking hippie. So there's something I'm starting to wonder about our good friend Mr. Zion, in regards of if he's going to be right or not. So I'm about to commit heresy, boys. You better be ready. I think Zion might be a little bit wrong in that everyone's going to choose to be either imperial or the Americans are going to walk away. While the populace itself overall seems to have this fervor that screw everybody else, whether it be Democrat or Republican, outside of the extremes, I keep consistently seeing a pattern that the leadership openly knows that the United States kind of needs to be involved in some capacity. So one side, the leadership isn't on board with this shit. The other side, if you want to put it in this perspective, is I think a lot of the world has woken up to the fact that the Americans run the show, and I don't think you're going to see a world that openly clamors for new empires, but actually the United States may end up becoming the world's largest tributary state in the regards that literally, how hard is it for multiple nations to be like, hey, look, if we need to cut you a deal to make sure that we can actually keep the fucking lights on, you treat us pretty well. You like liberal democracy, you actually provide a standard of living under your aegis. If we have to throw you a bone so that we don't have to, go into the nightmare mode, is that really a hard sell for some people?
How many people are going to have the foresight to take that?
I think a lot of people got woken up from the Russian invasion. I really do. Now, granted, I could be wrong here, but literally, looking at what the Europeans are doing right now, they've either figured out the world isn't what they thought it was going to be, or the Europeans are having one moment of clarity before everything goes to absolute dog shit.
Well, yeah, why is it not that, Ty? Because that seems like the most obvious.
Everything is going to dog shit.
Oh, okay, so I'm going to...
But hopefully it's not going to dog shit for that long. That's what I'm hoping.
Well, okay, so for me, I'm going to say this. I look at Europe as not like the socialist camp, but I definitely look at it as the far liberal camp, like the social democrats kind of thing. And here's what I'll say about this ilk of crowd. I can't stand them. And one of the big reasons I can't stand them is that they don't want to break out the beat stick and hit people with it. But when they finally fucking do, they commit. And we're seeing this with Russia. Literally, they're going to try to cut themselves from Russian oil exports this year. This year. They're so pissed off at the Russians that they're literally risking the possibility...
Yeah, but why are they so pissed off, Ty?
Because I think their hopes and dreams got ruined. I firmly believe that the Europeans were absolutely convinced that Europe had moved past war. I think they actually had that naive notion in their head, and now that they've woken up to that reality, oh wait, we actually have to maintain this shit. You've got the Swedes and the Finns talking about being NATO members, and they very well may be at the end of this summer, right?
They should be.
Yeah, they should. So, what is it to jump from everyone in Europe is now a NATO member to everyone in Europe now just basically kisses the ring of Washington to make sure that the Europeans don't fight again?
Oh, I see. So you're trying to say a tributary state. You mean the U.S. originally bribed the alliance?
Now the alliance
is going to bribe the U.S.?
Yes.
Yeah, but I just don't. I don't know that there's enough money in the world to
placate the Republicans.
I'm serious, because what's at stake is, I think it's, if you want the way the world has been, the cost is that there's no production inside the United States.
I think that's what's going to change. I think you're going to see...
Well, then you're not going to be able to pull this off, because...
No. This is what I think is going to happen, and if anyone's actually remotely gifted in geopolitics in Washington, which is going to be a big maybe... what you can see is that we see the world that looks a lot more between what it looked like a lot more in 1972 and earlier, or if you will, 45 to 72, where we offboard East Asia, except for maybe Taiwan, the Philippines, Taiwan, Japan, and South Korea, because they have a standard of living up to us and we have good relations with them. But everybody else can get fucked off because we don't like China, and India, it never really wanted to play ball anyway. So they get the boot. Meanwhile, Europe, even though they're going to be an old folks' home, they're not going to be an old folks' home that we can't handle.
They're all going to be old folks. Every country you just named is an old folks' home.
Or becoming one.
Yeah.
So I get where Zion's openly sitting here the United States is just literally going to be... the United States and Mexico, and then Canada's just kind of brought on for fun measure. I don't think it's going to be that way.
No. He thinks that the U.S. is still going to be active with Australia, Britain, and Japan.
Yeah, he's looking at the Quad, and he's looking at basically a lot of parts of what I'm saying is East Asia. These young demographics that are, growing and actually have a possibility for the future to becoming what we would refer to as developing nations. Mm-hmm. I don't think the American leadership class, if they're going to maintain a standard of living for Americans, I think they're going to have to cut somebody out, or they're going to have a completely different way of doing business. So either one, we go like the hard social democrat route where we've got the biggest welfare state in human history, or the business class basically gets a deal. You can't sell to China, or you can't buy from China, or anywhere in Southeast Asia, but you can from the Europeans because you actually have to pay them as much as you have to pay an American.
Interesting.
I think that's actually the logical deal, and of course, if that's the logical deal, then we probably
the only people that we protect with our military and our navy are going to be people who can't compete with the American worker.
Yes, unironically, yes. The people that like
I buy it, and I can't think of a. Let's put it this way: I can't think of a reason why it wouldn't work off the top of my head.
Well, thank you.
Because the European people will only allow that for like 2 quarters, and then they'll go blow up the whole system. That's why.
Yeah, because how is this good for them?
Because
they don't, especially, I love this embargo idea.
You're going through
throw an embargo.
You're going through famine and $15 gas.
For real. And then it's like, okay, hey guys, we're gonna look at let's see, quarter 4 of 2021, we had flat economic growth. Quarter one of 2022, we had slightly negative. So let's just go embargo Russia. I'm sure that this is going to lead to a lot of rejoicing in the streets, right? Like the only reason this is even going anywhere is because it's not November yet.
Yeah.
What's worse? What's a worse way to die? Dehydration and heat stroke, or freezing to death inside of your own home? I'm not sure, but we're about to find out because this is going to happen to people. Okay, and it's like,
wait till you see the refugees from the Middle East who were being protested just a couple years ago, finding common cause with the white ethnic Europeans in Spain and France and Italy to go fuck up the government.
That's exactly right. And wait until the populists get a hold of Germany and they go, oh, look at all these Muslims. Guess what? We'll just pay them to be our foot soldiers, and we'll create this like Hun army and invade directly. Like this, I don't know, guys. Like I'm not a big I think we're having a moment of kumbaya. I hope we're enjoying it.
It's the last.
I hope we're enjoying these moments.
It is the last gasp.
Okay, well, you might be right. Like,
I don't know, dude. I'm just saying, there's a lot of ways to fall off this tightrope. That's all I'm trying to impress here. I'm not
1,000%. But what I'm actually kind of advocating here is that it looks like we're finding out, very much like climate science actually, is that when you fall off the tightrope, there's a couple more ropes to catch you before you hit the bottom.
Sure. It's a controlled demolition. It's not a free fall.
The U.S. will have more control than other countries about how this turns out. That's for sure.
Yeah, and we're still in the early stages of the actual problems, right? I mean, that's the thing is that we should be looking pretty good right now. Right, I mean, this is when you need your institutions to show like they are sort of competent. Because if they're being incompetent at this stage, that means that the depth of human suffering is going to be much worse than I thought. So I guess,
I mean, we're going to see how this all turns out because, I'm of the belief, and we've talked about this before. I'm of the belief that we're going to, and this is all based on demographics, primarily, that we're going to see access to capital dry up. And everything's going to be ground to powder.
Yeah, what's your time frame on that?
Next decade.
Well, okay, yeah. I was just wondering if you thought it'd be like, no, by 2023 we're effed.
No, I don't know. I don't know when the market decides to fall and get back to where the reality is. But the reality is
probably like to right now. I just don't think the market makers will allow that yet.
I agree. But at a certain point, you can't keep it going anymore because.
Yeah,
capital outflows from pension funds are going to become unavoidable. I mean, we've got and that's what's happened. The reason why you're seeing all these unfilled, like I think we saw something this week that's like there are more unfilled job openings than there are possible people to fill them in the U.S. labor market.
Yep.
Total. But I think the reason why you're seeing that is because so many boomers decided to retire at the same time.
Yes.
And so when that happens, then you see pension outflows. So that means that money is being removed from institutional investors.
That's right. It turns out on the 15th and 30th, the amount of flow into the markets has declined because people are now retired. Totally agree. I mean, Zion in his original book said that the high tide would be Q1 of 2022, and then this was back in 2014. Right. And then from there, it just starts to precipitously go down.
That's right.
And his comment there was, it's like riding a mega wave. It's really sweet up at the top, and then the descent's pretty terrifying. So, like, yeah, I mean, welcome to the descent. COVID might have swung that off, though. We might already be slower. I don't know. I've never looked at the passive flows.
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible, and it doesn't. We're not going to register it until there's a cliff, because they can just keep on floating up for any number of years
totally
until and so we don't know when it's going to happen, but it is going to happen that we're going to lose access to easy capital, which is what's created the world we currently live in. Right, the idea that Silicon Valley can just get like really low interest rate loans to grow their giant businesses that aren't profitable for decades. Like, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen for like 80 years, right? Like,
I agree with all that. No, okay.
So we have to get humble, and I'm not saying that like other countries are going to overtake us. I'm saying we have to get humble about our aspirations because it's not going to be easy for anyone.
Yeah. Okay.
But luckily, in those type of environments, innovation flourishes because people have to find ways to make money even without access.
Yeah, certain types of innovation flourish.
Yeah.
Yes.
Adoption of already existent innovation.
Yeah, most of the time. And then also, but also the fine tuning of existing tech, right? So like whatever the existing tech is going to get way more efficient. Like we've mentioned this before, like the 1930s, we took a bunch of really good ideas that were already out in the ether and made them awesome. Right? And like Campbell's soup and stuff like that, like really took a couple of things that already existed and made them really cool. But we didn't go to the moon during the 30s, right? Like that's if you want revolutionary tech, you need a bunch of capital. So that we won't get a revolution, we'll just get a lot smarter with the stuff we have. Okay, can I recommend a quick shift? Because Sam, I'm
totally done with this. We got everything out of the discussion that I wanted to. Thank you for humoring me, guys.
No, that was super fun. I need you to settle a debate Ty and I have been having on the Discord.
Okay.
So no, this is a pretty chill debate, but I would like to know. I need you to break the tie because the tie. I'm so punny.
I automatically win.
And Tiberius wins, as is always the case. Tiberius
or is Nate the tiebreaker?
Ooh. Are you no, all right. So here's the thing. So this Roe thing happened. Okay.
Yes.
Now, we don't know exactly what the actual ultimate outcome is going to be. We don't. But
that's true.
The debate on Discord has been the following. This matters for our midterm elections in a big way and is very beneficial to Democrats. Or this will motivate the base of both parties and will be basically a zero impact on the midterms. Those seem to be the two positions. I'm in the latter camp, so I think that this motivates both bases equally. This will not affect anybody in the middle. No median voters are going to be affected by this. Ty disagrees with me, and he thinks that a bunch of independent and moderate voters will be motivated by this, and it gives the Democrats an opening. He's not predicting that the Democrats will do well. He's just saying, at least, Ty, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding in the Discord was, no, this gives the Democrats, if they play their cards right, an opening that didn't exist before this Roe thing happened, right? And so that means that there's a chance that the Dems could try to fight and keep the status quo in the House and the Senate because of this Roe deal. I'm of the opinion that that's just not true, and my thinking on this is all of the women or values voters who care about this topic were so incensed and pissed at Trump, they already sorted. So, like, the coalition, like, there's no median voter who was like, oh, man, I've never thought about this Roe v. Wade thing for the last 6 years. I guess now that it's being forced down my throat, I better make up my mind, and a bunch of people flip, or else they suddenly become partial to the Democrats. I think that exact phenomena, that would have been a strong argument in, say, 2012, but I think in the post-Trump era, I think that sorting has already occurred. So I just don't see it having really any impact on midterms, except for rallying the base. So that anyway, that's just my take. Can you break us on this? Ty, have I represented you okay?
I could add nuance, but I'll just simply suffice that I think this is going to be a big deal.
Okay, Sam, tell us what's the truth.
And the answer is I don't know. I mean, so
fair.
So it could be either or both. I don't think that it's even mutually exclusive. What you guys are describing, right? Like to be clear, in Ty's corner, the biggest problem the Democrats have with in dealing with Republicans in elections right now is not that we have fewer voters who are on our side. The problem is that our voters are depressed, and that okay, I'll get back to that. It's that they are depressed and think that everything is going to shit and we can't get anything done, and they don't believe in democratic elected officials anymore, even if they would vote for us if they believe in us. Okay,
gotcha.
So
the stay-at-home vote.
Yeah, and so this gives people a motivation to come out and vote that they didn't have before, and maybe it'll work. But there's a long time between now and the election. Maybe in the summer when this decision actually comes out, we'll see how it plays, right? In your corner, Nate, is that these Republican voters, like, I think it's because of the way that this would sort out if the decision is as leaked. What it means is not that abortion is suddenly illegal. What it means is that it's a state-by-state decision. And that is going to motivate the right wing like nobody's business. So, like, they have, like, the problem the Republicans have as a result of this is when they actually win the battle. Once they've won and all abortion is illegal, then they lose. They lose motivation, they lose steam. They'll have to find something else to replace it, and that's really hard to do, right? Like, this is the play that George Bush tried to make, right? Like, the Republican Party coalition was made up of military defense contractors and arms dealers, and so when the Cold War ended, they started losing to Democrats who were like talking about partying and playing saxophone, and they had to find something to replace the Cold War, and they were like, terrorism. What? It's the terrorists. War on terror, and it didn't work. People didn't buy it, and so they ended up losing with that coalition configuration, right? So it's going to be hard if the Republicans win blanket on abortion for them to maintain their
values
political activation levels that they have right now with their values coalition.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
However, the way this is set up, at least for 2022, is that it's actually they have to turn out to make sure that pro-life Republicans win in their states in order to get this decision put into law. And so it's going to be a major motivating factor. And to your point, Nate, the places where the swing districts and Senate elections are happening in 2022 are places where the evangelical vote is quite strong. You know, I wouldn't be surprised to see some Democratic machine states that are a little sleepy, like Illinois, go down. Do you know how many evangelical Christians are in Illinois?
A shitload.
So many.
15 or 20, is that what you're telling me?
The only reason why they aren't dominating the state is because Chicago is so goddamn big.
Facts.
So, in a bad year for Democrats, you could see all kinds of stuff. If this isn't motivating enough. And I would also say, the last thing I would say is Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Yeah. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If all the stuff that we had the last time we had this conversation, we were talking about how farmers are no longer going to be planting crops. So if you think that the majority of voters are going to be voting based on abortion in this environment, you're fucking fucking crazy. Outside of a small group of people who are unaffected by these things, who can shop at Whole Foods and have no fucking issues, and that's just a tiny, tiny group of people. Okay, I have plenty more to say about this, but I think I've answered the electoral section of this.
That's good. That's good. All right, so Ty and I remain tied. Tie squared.
We'll have to see.
Well, for sure.
I think the worst
if
thing,
the decision doesn't flip. I mean, it might. I doubt it.
Come on, it's going to. So there's one more thing that I would have to say, and that is that the Democrats can't seem like they're letting this go on purpose in order to motivate voters to turn out. Because the biggest problem, I and I've talked about this so many times, the biggest problem the Democrats have right now, as a party, something that comes up over and over and over again, is that the Democrats have made an alliance, or have, not an alliance, they've remained reliant on the mainstream press. And the Republicans have not. The Republicans have built their own ecosystem of media. And the mainstream press believes it is their solemn duty as journalists with a capital J to write stories in such a way that purposefully makes the average person cynical about the political process when they read it. They purposely excise all values language and about what's right and wrong from everything with their piece, and they write it only about a horse race of who's ahead and who's behind, and it's all a game. So when the Democrats, everything they do that goes to their voters, because we're relying on the mainstream press, is filtered through that horse race, politics is a game filter. And the Republicans, everything that goes to their voters is filtered through the Republicans are doing things that are righteous and Christian, and our enemies are pedophiles. So
groomers, not pedophiles. You need to be clear. They're grooming the kids so they can be pedophiles in the future. Get your sequencing right.
Right. So in that calculus, it's a big problem, because the way that our media the media that Democratic voters are reading right now is possibly going to be covering this like, well, the Democrats aren't really going to do anything about this because they want to make sure you turn out in the elections. And that is going to infuriate people and make them stay home if they cover it that way. So far, from what I've seen out of Biden, it hasn't been that bad. But Chuck Schumer is so thick that I could see him literally just doing a press conference and being like, well, we gotta crush him in the election, and transparently sending out fundraising emails being like, this is why we need to win these Senate races, and just looking like a scumbag. In a scumbag, it's two types of scumbags. There's a scumbag that's on your side, and there's a scumbag that's using you and is not on your side at all. And the Democrats can't afford to be number two. And the media is going to cover them as number two, because the journalists are the most cynical people in all of D.C. More cynical than the Republicans, more cynical than the Democrats, more cynical than the voters, more cynical than anybody. The most cynical people, the people who have the worst things to say about the state of America, are the journalists. And that's how that colors the way that they write. So it's a trap. It's a bad trap, and it's particularly bad on an issue like this, where the Democrats don't have the power to actually write legislation and pass it to fix it.
Oh, that's wild. Well, I'll be interested. I'll be interested to see. I still expect a bloodbath in November, but
Me too.
Who knows? Maybe the decision actually comes down, and Marco Rubio says, "I'm introducing a bill right now to ban abortions everywhere in the whole world," and then zero tolerance. Well, you have 20. What do they call them? When the egg implants outside the fallopian tube or whatever, the ectopic I don't know.
Ectopic pregnancy.
Yeah, ectopic pregnancies. Be like, if you have one of those, don't care. Kill them all. Let all the women die. It's not a big deal.
Yeah,
like if they,
let your fallopian tubes explode.
Yeah, and it's if they overplay their hand on this, then I think the Republicans could really put mess it up. But
Well, would you guys like to continue talking about this? Because I have lots of opinions on the long-term impact to this.
yes, but I also want to go to bed. I'm just
Okay.
exhausted.
Yeah, it is getting kind of late.
So here's what I'm going to promise. Next Thursday, my promise is I'm bringing a slideshow, Mountain Dew. We're talking families. And then that family
Unfortunately, I won't
conversation.
be able to do it next Thursday.
Okay, whatever the next time that we meet is, I'm bringing the heat.
Can
And sorry, Ty.
I want to actually hit you guys on this real quick. Can we have a conversation about doing that on the fly? Just being like, hey guys, hey, I'm good to do it tonight, because what's going to happen for me is that the forecast for the next 2 weeks after tomorrow is looking pretty damn good. And I'm just sitting here like, guys, I might be in the field for the next 3 weeks.
Okay.
That's fair. How about this? I'll just be ready, and I will whenever you're ready, Ty. If you're available, we'll try to be available, and we'll bring the heat, and then we'll have a family, because the family issues we're going to easily connect over to some of these value questions.
Yeah.
And so the value questions will come up with alternative families. So I would say these are families where there's one or more of the parents is trans or LGBTQ, and then also some of these issues regarding abortion. They sort of nestle nicely into this.
You're right. I'm sorry. 100%. It fits in perfectly. I didn't know why I didn't think of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think if we do about 45 minutes just on some of the academic research on what's happening with nuclear families, how they're rearranging, etc., and then we can use that to move into what we think the values debates around family life. So that's LGBTQ gender issues. We could talk about those in those contexts for the back half or 2/3 even. And what we think might happen to those over the long haul, that I think would be a very interesting conversation, because I think those things sit on top of each other really, really well. So that's what I propose.
All right.
And I'll be ready, Ty. I'll get it written up this weekend. Starting Monday, you can just be like, I'm available. Let's go. I'm like, all right, great.
Sounds great, man. And I appreciate all your hard work.
And Ty, thank you for your patriotic duty of supplying this nation with food.
Well, I appreciate it. I don't know if it's patriotic because, it's just,
it is in this situation.
Well, fair enough. It is the family business, but the real thing is, like, it just pays the bills, because I fucking hate this job. Kill me now, please.
Good. We'll talk about tie-in jobs at another time, which I've been meaning to talk to you about for months, but
I know.
You and I both keep having calendars that don't line up to make that happen. So.
Well, have we tried that we got to be honest with ourselves? Have we really tried to schedule that?
I mean, maybe. I don't know. It's difficult.
Yeah.
It's a difficult thing.
It is. Well, we need to have that chat. But anyway, without further ado, guys, I have been Tyberius D over here on the conversation. We have been joined by Nate Dallin and Sam Drizzy. We've been talking about quite a few things this evening, but this is going to be the end of this particular, I don't know what you would call it, episode, series, what have you. Not series. We're going to keep this series going for a while. This particular episode, we're done. If you're still watching my stream over on Twitch, the good news is, and actually on YouTube, because we do stream on YouTube, is that we're not ending yet tonight. While this particular event is over, I have been invited over onto Big Buck and Empire to talk about this very, very particular issue with Roe v. Wade and whatnot. And so I'm going to drop in there for about, hopefully 30 minutes tops. We're going to try to keep it at that with a hard limit. But yeah, if you want to catch that over, or catch that out, just keep along for the show. Until next time, we'll catch you later.